I got there early. Too early, maybe. I had on my Sunday best, the navy dress with the pearl buttons, the one I kept pressed for funerals or first Sundays. My shoes pinched, but I walked like they didn't. The streets of downtown Atlanta hummed as people hurried past, eyes glued to phones, voices clipped with urgency. Me? I moved slow, purposeful. The way you do when you're walking into something you helped build, but haven't been invited to. I stepped into that building like I still belonged. Glass walls, marble floors, the smell of expensive air conditioning. A young woman behind the front desk looked up, smiled with that forced kind of politeness folks wear when they don't know what box to put you in. "May I help you, ma'am?" I told her my name. "Venora Webb. I'm here to see Tremaine. He's my son." She blinked, hesitated, tapped on her keyboard like she was searching for an answer that wasn't there. I'll check if he's available." I nodded and took a seat, resting the small wooden box in my lap. Inside was the old logo I'd painted for him years ago, back when Tremaine had dreams and no office. I sat there surrounded by chrome and cold glass, looking like a relic in a museum built from my own past. Every tick of that wall clock echoed the question I didn't want to ask. Did he know I was coming? Or did he forget? Then I saw him. Tremaine came walking through those glass doors, tall and sharp in a suit that cost more than my mortgage ever did. Staff flanked him on both sides, all laughing about something I couldn't hear. I stood, smiled. He froze. Then, loud enough for everyone to hear, he said, "You don't belong here, Mama. This is a business." The room fell quiet. You could hear the ice in that silence. His assistant looked down. Somebody cleared their throat. I just stood there, box still in hand, smile dying slow on my face. "I just came to—" I started. He walked right past me. I reached toward him, wooden box out like an offering. He didn't even glance at it. A man in a blazer, security, I guess, approached, polite like they trained them to be. "Ma'am, maybe you'd be more comfortable waiting outside." I looked at him, then at the ceiling, then at my hands. I didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't ask why, just gathered my things, stood straight, and turned toward the exit. But before I could leave, the doors opened again. Mr. Langford stepped in. White man, older, chairman of the board. I remembered him from back when they were still pitching to local investors. He paused, looked at me. "Mrs. Webb?" he said, surprised. "Venora Webb. You helped us win our first big account." The room shifted, eyes turned. Even Tremaine stiffened. Langford walked over and offered his hand like I was someone worth remembering. "What are you doing out here in the lobby?" I looked at my son, then back at Mr. Langford. "They told me I don't belong here," I said quietly. His jaw clenched, the kind of tight that meant he wasn't going to say much, but he was thinking plenty. That silence, it screamed louder than any words. And Tremaine? He didn't say a thing. Standing there with his expensive shoes and polished pride, like I was just some story he'd outgrown. I held that box tighter. Memories flashed. Not like warm light, but like cuts. I saw him as a boy, hunched over the kitchen table, me helping him balance checkbooks and draw up fake invoices so he could practice. I'd taken money from my pension, every dime I had saved for retirement, and handed it over with one sentence: "Build something you can be proud of." Guess I never said, "Don't forget who helped you build it." Maybe that was my mistake. Maybe I raised a man who learned how to win, but never how to look back. The hallway behind us was quiet, tense. I adjusted my purse strap, nodded to Mr. Langford, and walked out without another word. As the elevator doors closed, I caught my reflection. Poised, neat, unbothered. But my hands trembled. That box, still unopened. Outside, the Atlanta heat slapped me. I blinked back the sting in my eyes and muttered under my breath, "Even silence can be a protest." But that morning, silence was only the beginning. The ride home felt longer than it ever had. The box sat in my lap like it weighed 100 pounds. I didn't turn on the radio, didn't want no noise cutting through my thoughts. I just drove through those downtown streets, the ones dressed in suits and concrete pride, watching the buildings get shorter, older, humbler, the farther I got from my son's empire. It hit me somewhere around Capitol Avenue. I hadn't been up there in years. Not because I wasn't proud, Lord knows I was, but pride don't send invites, and success don't call just to say, "Hey mama, I made it." I pulled into my driveway, same old house, paint peeling a little near the porch, roses still blooming stubbornly beside the steps. One's Tremaine planted when he was just a boy with muddy knees and wild ideas. I sat in the car a minute longer before stepping out, held the box tighter. That thing had history in it, more than he remembered. Inside, I kicked off my shoes and headed straight to the side table by the window, the one with the drawer full of things I kept when nobody else was keeping count. I opened it. There it was, an envelope, still sealed. His first office launch, sent in the mail like I was a customer, not his mother. No call, no follow-up, just paper, cold and impersonal. I remembered that night clear as day. I'd cooked pot roast, mashed potatoes, waited by the phone like I was back in high school, hoping a boy might call. TV on low, eyes drifting to every news segment thinking maybe, just maybe, they'd flash his name across the screen. Something like, local entrepreneur opens his first firm. But there was nothing, just weather reports and car commercials. And silence. I held that envelope like it could still hurt me. And it did. Because deep down I realized I was never meant to be in the picture. I was only meant to watch it from the sidelines. Later I made tea just to have something warm in my hands. I sat by the window. The moon peeked through the trees, and for whatever reason, I thought of Charisma, his wife. Beautiful, polished. Always had that voice like honey poured over ice. She'd once called to smooth over something, like she always did when Tremaine didn't have time. "You know how busy we were back then, Mama V. Don't take it personal." But it was personal, especially after I'd heard from my neighbor down the street, whose niece worked with Charisma's cousin, messy chain, I know, but reliable, that she had said she was never part of the company, that was all Trey's hustle. And just like that, my part in the story was wiped clean. No mention of the sketch on a napkin I made for that logo. No mention of my savings, my prayers, my Sundays sacrificed so he could chase something bigger than this neighborhood. I sat up straighter, went to the hallway closet and pulled out an old leather journal. I hadn't touched it in years. The cover still smelled like the bookstore we bought it from, back when he swore he'd fill it with business ideas. I opened it, wrote 4 words on the first page, what success took from me. And then I started writing. Not to get even, not to blast nobody, but because the truth, the real kind, deserves a witness. I wrote down the time he called me crying over a lost deal, and I told him to keep going. I taped in an old receipt from the office chair I bought him at the thrift store. I found a photo. Him, age 14, standing next to a sketch pad, beaming at a logo he said looked official. Let them rewrite the story. I was gonna tell mine. The house was quiet, just the hum of the fridge and the distant barks of a dog down the block. I stared at the journal for a long while, hand still on the cover, when my phone buzzed. Voicemail. I picked it up. The caller ID read, Langford. I pressed play. "Mrs. Webb, we need to talk." I saw something today I can't ignore. My eyes fixed on the red blinking light. The air in the room shifted. Everything went still. I hadn't even pressed play yet, but somehow, I already knew it was time. Sunday morning light came in soft through my curtains, the kind that makes you feel like maybe peace is still possible. I put on my blue church dress, the one with the pearl buttons that always took too long to fasten. It had been a hard week, and I told myself that sitting in that familiar pew would make things right again, or at least quiet inside my head for an hour. The choir was already singing when I walked in. Faces I'd known for years turned toward me. Some smiled, some didn't. The ones who didn't looked away too quick. I felt it right then, that strange shift in the air when you walk into a room and you become the story. After service, I stood near the fellowship table, fixing a small plate of macaroni and a slice of pound cake. Mrs. Holcomb, the deacon's wife, came up beside me, whispering like we were about to share gossip, too dangerous for walls. "Venora," she said, glancing around. "You didn't hear it from me, but they've been talking." I set my fork down slow. Talking about what? She leaned closer. They said Tremaine only keeps you out the business because, well, your memory ain't what it used to be. Said you be forgetting things now. Her words slid through me like a blade dipped in sugar. I tried to smile, just to keep my dignity intact, but my jaw locked up. Who told you that? She shook her head fast. You know how people talk. I'm sure he didn't mean no harm. No harm. That's what folks always say when they stab you soft. On the drive home, I kept replaying it. The faces, the whispers, the little looks I hadn't noticed before. I started to wonder, had I really forgotten something? Was there a reason they believed it? At home, I walked into my kitchen and froze. I'd come in for something, coffee maybe, but now I just stood there staring at the stove like it owed me an answer. My own pause betrayed me. I heard her voice again in my head. She be forgetting things now. That's when I whispered out loud. Now every time I pause, it ain't just age, it's ammunition. I went to the drawer where I keep my journals, flipping through pages, testing my own mind. My handwriting, steady. My thoughts, clear. I pulled out a letter I'd written Tremaine years back, one congratulating him on his first expansion. I'd tucked a check inside, told him to use it for the new office. I remember sealing that envelope, praying over it before sending. He never once mentioned it. I sat down hard at the table. That letter proved I wasn't slipping. I remembered every detail. That whisper wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a move. A deliberate one. Someone was trying to rewrite me again, but this time it wasn't just about business. It was about reputation. The phone rang, jolting me out my thoughts. It was Mr. Langford. Mrs. Webb, he started slow, like each word weighed something. I saw something the other day at the office, something that didn't sit right. What was it? I asked. He hesitated. Just, be careful who you trust. You didn't hear this from me, all right? Before I could press him, the line went dead. I sat there listening to the hum of the fridge again. That sound was becoming the rhythm of my new life. Me, the hum, and 100 half-truths bouncing off the walls. Enough of that. I went to the hall closet and dragged out 3 old boxes from storage. Dust rose up like ghosts. Inside were receipts, logo sketches, business notes, even a checkbook from the early days with both our names on it. I stacked them on the dining table. One by one, I sorted through what I had. Evidence. Memory. Proof. Then I found an old folder, one my late husband had kept. His old colleague's name was right there on an early LLC form, proof that I'd been part of it since day one. I grabbed a notebook and started making 2 lists. Left side. People who know the truth. Right side. People who chose to forget. At the bottom, I added one more. People who benefit from my silence. They thought I wouldn't remember. But I did more than remember. I kept the receipts. As night fell, I made tea, sat down at my desk, and opened my laptop. I was ready to write it all down proper. That's when a new email appeared at the top of my inbox. Subject line, Ms. Webb. Internal notes, do not forward. My hands shook as I clicked it open. There was just one screenshot attached, an internal message thread. My name highlighted in yellow beside a note that read, emotionally unstable, not to be involved in operations or public communications. The room went silent. My pulse didn't. I leaned back in the chair, whispered to no one. The only unstable thing was their fear that I'd speak. I asked him to meet me, just him and me, in public. No staff, no cameras. I wanted words between 2 souls, not fight in a court of whispers. So I picked a cafe in Midtown, a place we passed on the way to his first job after college. I showed up early, dressed in the old company colors, the blues and grays I used to sketch in my mind when we dreamed together. The table by the window gave me a view of passing cars, faces, ambitions. He walked in late, eyes cautious. I spoke first. I taught you better than to hide behind silence, Trey. His jaw clenched. He held up his hands. Mama, it's complicated. I leaned forward. Is it complicated or just convenient? He swallowed. I watched him trip over words. Finally, I laid it bare. Either you come clean to your people about what I built, or I will. That was when the air changed. We sat with a line drawn between us. A warning, not a threat, though it felt like both. No applause, no reaction, just a stare. I reached into my bag and slid some papers across the table. Licensing agreement from years ago, his name and mine side by side. He froze, then said it was expired. I shook my head. Expired contracts don't erase permanent truths. I swore I saw regret flicker in his eyes. I told him about my handwriting on first drafts, the sticky notes torn from my sketch pad, a down payment I made on that first office he never told me about. He said, "You don't understand the stakes." I replied cold, "I understand them better than you think." He rose abruptly, excusing himself. But just as he turned, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "You don't know me, but I know what they did. Meet me." Attached, a partial screenshot of a boardroom vote. My name flagged under obstruction risk. Later that night, I sat in a corner booth at a diner, waiting. She arrived quietly. Lena. No introduction. No fanfare. Just look in her eyes that said she knew what I already felt. Erased. She told me how Tremaine's rise was built on erasing my face from every ledger, every document. Many knew the truth, but fear stayed their tongues. She agreed to help me secretly gather memos, signatures, internal memos no one dared show. I walked home slow, mind buzzing. I texted Tremaine. "This is not a threat. This is your final offer to do what's right." His reply came swift. "Do what you need to, but don't come crying when this blows up." I said nothing. I pulled out the folder Lena gave me and spread the contents across the dining table. Receipts, original banner photo, my late husband, young Tremaine, and me, standing before a web company sign long erased. A calmness settled in me, deep and hard. I picked up a photo, held it in front of me, and felt something shift. Later, under the dim hall light, an envelope slid under my door. My heart paused. I bent, picked it up. Redacted HR complaint from years ago I never knew existed. The title? Concerns regarding Mrs. Webb's interference with company direction. In silence I whispered, "Funny how history rewrites itself without your permission." I didn't sleep that night. The house was quiet, but my thoughts weren't. That redacted HR letter lay open on the table, its black lines cutting across the page like old scars. My eyes kept returning to the date printed at the top. 2 years before I ever left the company. 2 years before Tremaine announced my retirement. Retirement. That's what he called it. But looking at that letter, I saw the truth for what it was. A burial, filed under mental health grounds. As if forgetting my name from the documents wasn't enough, they had to erase my mind, too. I whispered into the dim room. "So that's how you buried me alive." The sky outside began to lighten, slow and steady. I opened the blinds and let the sunrise in. The light caught the edge of the letter, and for the first time, it didn't sting to look at it. I wasn't done. I was just waking up. By the time the clock struck 7, I called Lena. My voice was low, but steady. "That HR file you sent me, you said it was circulated?" She sighed. "Yes, Mrs. Webb. It went around the board before your exit. Mr. Clarkson initiated it, but Tremaine approved it." For a second, I didn't breathe. "He signed it?" "He did," she said quietly. "He didn't have to, but he did." The silence that followed was heavy enough to bend steel. I thought of my boy, my only child, putting his name on a lie to make it official. "When your child signs your burial papers," I said, half to her, half to God, "you don't ask why, you just remember." The weight in my chest didn't feel like heartbreak anymore. It was focus, cold, clean focus. I hung up and walked to my office, that small spare room where I used to pay bills and balance books. Now it looked like a war room. Folders open, papers spread out. my old laptop blinking with reminders. I began scanning every document I had, one by one, building a folder labeled the web files. Every click of the scanner was a heartbeat. Every file, a memory I refused to let them rewrite. Then I turned on the camera on my laptop and hit record. My face filled the screen, aged but unbroken. "This isn't just about my son," I said softly. "This is about every elder they silence once they think we've outlived our usefulness." Behind me, an old gospel record played, the same song my mother used to hum while scrubbing church floors. "You can't hide truth under gold." I smiled faintly. "They can erase me on paper, but they can't delete what's been seen." I uploaded the video to a private cloud and sent Lena the link. Not long after, she replied, "Done. It's safe." Then, an hour later, another message from her. "Check the news." A document had leaked anonymously to the press, a memo naming me as the original founder of the firm's client strategy, signed by Tremaine in his early days. Lena didn't admit it outright, but I knew it was her. The fire inside me stopped being rage. It became direction. By noon, my phone rang. His voice was sharp before I even said hello. "Do you know what you've done? You've destroyed everything." "I only told the truth," I said. He shouted, "You think this is some moral game? You've put us all at risk. I was trying to protect the company, protect you." I laughed, not out of humor, but out of disbelief. "Protect me? You forged me out of existence." He went quiet, then snapped back. "You were slipping. You forgot things. You weren't yourself." I kept my tone calm. "No, Trey. You were slipping into the kind of man I warned you not to become." There was nothing left to say after that. He hung up. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was electric. Minutes later, my phone buzzed again. New voicemail. I pressed play, expecting another rant. Instead, I heard my own voice, a recording of my conversation with Lena. Someone had leaked it. The last thing on the tape wasn't me or Lena. It was another voice, low and urgent. "They're coming for you next, Mrs. Webb." I sat back, staring at the phone until the screen went black. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of who they were. I was ready. The notice came early. Updates and clarification on the company virtual meeting. I didn't hesitate. I logged in, pinning myself to that screen. There they were. Tremaine, Charisma, board members arrayed in neat boxes, each one lit by ambition. My video feed remained muted at first. I watched them talk about legacy matters, about her role being ceremonial. Whispers echoed in side chats. She was disruptive in the past. I kept silent. I reminded myself, I will not beg, I will show facts. Then I unmuted. Let me speak truth that's been silenced for years. That was all I got out. The screen flickered. My mic vanished. My image shifted off camera. Tremaine's voice slid in. "Technical difficulties. Let's move on." Board members sat still, some nodding, no one objecting. The betrayal hit me dark, their complicity louder than any lie. But then, Dion Kittrell appeared. The camera shifted. He said softly, "That was no technical glitch, Mrs. Webb, you deserve to be heard." Silence cracked. He turned directly to Tremaine, demanding her mic be restored. Tremaine froze. Dion announced he would broadcast her full presentation unfiltered to the entire company. The room stilled. Shock flickered across faces. Charisma's lips pressed thin. After the meeting, I opened the chat logs and internal messages. Messages like, "Thank you for speaking your truth." Finally, someone with courage came from executives I barely recognized. Then Tremaine's text. "You crossed a line today. You'll regret this." My heart stung, but I drafted my statement. I returned to my web files, preparing to post once this meeting ended. Moments before sending, my system forced me off. Session terminated. Unauthorized broadcast detected. On my screen, black. But then I checked backups. They pushed me out. But the presentation had already auto-uploaded to the public channel. They tried to silence me. But I was never unplugged. I walked into that boardroom carrying my truth in a folder, The air was thick, the kind of weight you can taste. Executives seated, pens poised, eyes flicking past me. It felt like a trial. I stood at the podium. I cleared my throat. I'm here to show evidence that cannot be dismissed. A hush fell. Side glances passed between them like rumors. I placed the folder labeled Web Founding Files on the stand. I opened it and lifted the original contract. 3 signatures finger-inked. Dion, Tremaine, and me. That paper was my name in blue. Beside it, I held up redacted versions with my name scratched out, margin notes overwritten in a different hand. The clause was clear. Co-founder, equity share, voice in governance. This was not a draft. It was the foundation. Board members gasped. Charisma's face went pale. Tremaine jumped to his feet. "That's forged! You doctored it!" he shouted. I stayed calm. I placed the original and the altered copy side by side. Then I called up the metadata logs, dated entries from servers showing when the changes were made. Next, I played the recording Lena gave me. Internal emails referencing me by name, conversations that admitted erasure. Tremaine's stutter couldn't find words. Charisma opened her mouth, then shut it again. I spoke steady. Vision built on erasure is no vision at all. The room cracked. Dion rose and said, "This meeting is now open to company-wide broadcast." Cameras clicked on. Live feeds rolled. I looked out at screens beyond the room. Colleagues, media, community. I raised my voice. "You deserve to know the story they tried to bury." I read key lines. My founding role versus what's printed on their corporate site. Board members shifted. Charisma tried to interject. I cut her off. When the chairman called for a vote, to reinstate me, to open all past records, the tension killed the space. Tremaine hovered, uncertain. I held myself steady. They must choose, and I will accept no less than justice. When I stepped into that auditorium, I could feel the hum of electricity in the air. Cameras, murmurs, eyes tracking me like I was walking into history. The banners hung high. BLK Ventures, not a trace of my family name left on them, but I brought my name with me. In a small wooden box, I carried the first logo I ever sketched, the contract copies, and the laptop that held every document they buried. Tremaine and Charisma smiled for the cameras, polished and careful. They looked like hosts, not thieves. When I reached the stage, I didn't wait for anyone to introduce me. "Thank you for letting me speak," I said, my voice steady. "I won't ask permission." It started simple. I told them about the vision, the first nights at that kitchen table when this company was just an idea. Then the screens behind me flickered. At first, a presentation glitch, then a leak. Footage of old board meetings appeared, Charisma's voice approving edits, approving the removals. Her mask began to slip. The crowd gasped. Whispers swelled into a restless wave. Tremaine tried to calm the room, but his voice cracked under the weight of truth. Every lie they'd built began to crumble right there under the spotlight. And then the noise broke out online. Phones lifted in the audience, streaming live. Comments started pouring in faster than the screens could refresh. "She's the real founder." They erased her name. "Justice for Mrs. Webb." The world was watching. Journalists tweeted live quotes. Hashtags climbed. Charisma's PR team huddled in the corner, faces pale as the footage looped again, her approving the deception she'd denied for years. She looked like she wanted to disappear into the carpet. Then came the vote. Dion's voice cut through the chaos. "This board will now decide." Tremaine looked cornered, searching for any remaining ally, but one by one, members stood on my side. Dion spoke again. "Your authority, Mr. Webb, is under revision." Tremaine opened his mouth, then closed it. The silence that followed was louder than any argument we'd ever had. Charisma stood back, her face drained of that practiced charm. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just breathes. After the applause died down, an assistant approached me backstage and handed me an envelope. No name on it, just wait. I tore it open. Inside was a small drive labeled Confession, Clarkson, me.pdf. I opened it, and there it was. A recorded call. Tremaine's mentor, Clarkson, admitting to forging the documents, instructing HR to bury my record. The voice was calm, rehearsed, the tone of a man who thought no one would ever hear him. I leaned back, staring at the screen, the crowd's echoes still drifting through the doors. They thought the reckoning ended here. They were wrong. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about ending the lies. All of them. Morning sunlight crept across my kitchen walls, soft and unhurried. For the first time in what felt like forever, the house was still. No reporters calling, no whispers, no tension vibrating through the air. Just quiet. I stood by the window, watching lights spill over the table where the coffee pot hummed. On the counter sat the plaque from last night's ceremony, still wrapped, still gleaming with other people's fingerprints. I hadn't opened it yet. I didn't need to. The noise of the world could wait. I cracked 2 eggs into the skillet and thought, this piece. I thought I'd lost the right to it. When the doorbell rang, I didn't flinch. I wiped my hands, walked slow, and opened the door. There he was. Dion. No suit, no assistant, no armor. Just my son. He held the old wooden web box against his chest like it weighed something more than wood and paper. It belongs to you, he said, eyes low. His voice carried something I hadn't heard in a long while. Truth. I didn't know how much I didn't know. I didn't rush to forgive him. I didn't need to. I just nodded and stepped aside. You got time for breakfast? He smiled, small but real, and followed me in. We ate mostly in silence, the kind that doesn't hurt anymore. He asked about the award, about the neighbors who'd stopped by with flowers. I didn't boast. I just told him the truth, that none of this was about being right. It was about being whole. When he left, he took nothing with him except that quiet between us that meant something had healed. By afternoon, I was standing in the community center, surrounded by faces I hadn't seen in years. Pastor Elijah spoke first. Some legacies don't need gold to shine. Mrs. Webb reminded us who we are. The crowd clapped, not loud, but steady, like a heartbeat. The choir sang, "A change is gonna come," and somewhere in the back, I saw folks wiping their eyes. When they called my name, I walked up slow, accepting the plaque with a steady hand. I didn't do this to be seen, I told them. But being seen sure feels different now. That evening, my dining room was alive again. Dion sat beside Cynthia, charisma quiet but present, and one of Tremaine's former assistants now working for me, laughing softly at something I said. The food was simple. Baked chicken, collard greens, cornbread, but it felt like abundance. I set the web box inside a new glass case by the fireplace, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. I told Dion an old story, how he used to help me count receipts at that kitchen table. He smiled, said he barely remembered. That's all right, I said. Memory's a gift you earn back when you stop running from it. As the night slowed, the laughter thinned into comfortable silence. I looked around that table and thought, this is what survival looks like. Not revenge, not victory, just stillness that no one can take. Before heading to bed, I opened my old journal, the one I'd locked away years ago, and began to write. The pen didn't shake this time. To my future granddaughter, I wrote, I don't know your name yet, but one day, when you read this, you'll understand why truth matters. You belong everywhere they said you didn't. Walk tall, baby girl. Speak even when they pretend not to hear. You come from women who never stayed buried. I closed the book, set it beside the window, and let the light from the street lamps wash over the pages. No anger left, no fear. Just peace, and the promise of tomorrow.